Hello everybody and welcome to the training on actually conducting the call itself, conducting the consultation. Now this is where we actually have to talk to somebody and where the rubber meets the road for a lot of people. So the objective of the call is that we want to get a decision on the call. We want to get a yes or a no from them. We want a clear decision, and either one is absolutely fine. And as we talked about before, we're not we're not attached at all to the outcome. We're not worried if it's a yes, and we're not worried if it's a no. We just want a clear decision because that's the best for everybody. Because for the average salesperson in the average sales consultation, 95% of calls or 95% of meetings, they don't end in a no, right? The prospect doesn't say no. They say, send me some more information, or yeah, I'm interested, let me think about it, whatever. But the fact of the matter is, those presentations and those calls, they don't end in a yes either. So really, you're no better off than you were when you started. So I personally like a one call process that ends with a decision on the call, right? So as a lot of you are finding out, it's not very difficult to generate leads. It's not very difficult to generate these calls. And if you're having 2 or 3 of these calls a day, maybe even more some days, and there's not a clear decision at the end of it, and you've got to do follow up and this and that, then we just really start to get bogged down in the follow up process, and our business starts to lose traction, and we start doing a bunch of stuff that really doesn't make us any money and is never going to make us any money. So we want to get a decision on the call if at all possible. And if it ends in a yes or a no, it doesn't matter, right? Because what we really don't want to be hearing is maybe, or I'll think about it. That's the worst thing we can hear. We want to get off that call with the clarity that we know they're moving forward or they're not moving forward. And we want the prospect to have the same clarity as well, right? We want them to know they're moving forward. We want them to know they're not moving forward. So maybe I'll do this, or I need some time to think about it, or next month. These are not things that we really want to allow on the call, and we're going to talk about that. So as I've said, there are lots of ways to conduct a successful sales call, and I don't want to get hung up on this. This is just the way that I do it. And if you have a way that works already, don't by all means let me talk you out of that. If you're talking to people and you're getting people into contracts and you're getting them into deals with the process that you've got, please don't let me talk you out of that. This is for people that are looking for that process. They're looking for a way to get more people to say yes, or they just don't really have a sales process at all. So as I say, there's lots of ways to skin a cat. This is just one that works. It works for me. But if you've got a way that works, then by all means stick to that. Maybe there's some stuff in here that you can add to it, or stuff like that, but certainly don't change a winning formula if you've got it. As I say, don't let me change what you're doing if it's working. So as we've said, the most important thing that you can approach the call with is the mindset, and that's a mindset and an attitude of servitude. You're getting on this call to help the person. You're getting on this call to progress the person. And everything we do is designed not to manipulate them into a decision. It's designed to get them to make the right decision. It's designed to get them to take the action that's best for them. And quite often, like, we'll say, no, I'm sorry, this is not right for you. I'm not going to be able to help you. I don't think it's the right time. So we'll say no to them as well quite often. And again, that's part of the mindset of approaching this. This is not we're getting on the phone to sell them on the idea that they should hire us. They've got to sell us on the idea that they're an ideal client as well. We don't work with just anybody. We only take on ideal clients, and they've got to demonstrate to us that they're going to be a great fit for us too. So we want to communicate that, and I'm going to show you how to do that as well. So watch video 1 often, the one with the mindset, because if you can get that right, and like I say in the video, it's like it sounds easy, but it's a discipline, and we need to be reminded constantly. So watch that as often as you can. But if you've got that mastered, if you've got the mindset mastered, or you're pretty confident with it, then as I say, pretty much any approach to the call is going to work. But I know everybody likes specifics, so let's get into the very specifics of how I conduct a sales call, or how I attempt to make a sales call, the structure that I use, and the theory behind why I do what I do, right? So this is the process that I use, and really it's based around a book called the Dan Sullivan question. The whole process is based around the Dan Sullivan question. It is literally a question. So that's a book. I've mentioned it before. I think I mentioned it in week 1, and it's just a great way to hold a consultation. It's kind of the non-sales process. So if you haven't got that, I recommend getting it and reading it. But we're going to have a look at it anyway. So here is the Dan Sullivan question, right? The question is, if we were having this conversation 18 months from now, 18 months from today, and you were looking back over those 18 months, what would have to have happened in your life, both personally and professionally, for you to feel happy with your progress? Now, the big thing here that most people don't pick up on that's actually very important is what would have to happen both personally and professionally. So most people just focus on the professional aspect of what you're bringing to this person, to this prospect, but what they're going to achieve personally and what they're going to miss out on personally in their personal life and their family life if you don't bring the solution that they're looking for. This is very impactful and this is going to be very important, and we're going to talk about this. So you want to keep in mind that this is both personal and professional. We're not just going to talk on the conversation, or we're not going to talk on the call about their professional life. We're going to try and pull their personal life into it as well, because as we all know, it's all related. We can't separate one area of our life or affect one area of our life without affecting other areas of our life. So the whole call really revolves around that particular question, but we structure it in such a way that it makes sense, right? So here's the structure that I use. So we'll run through the structure quickly, and then we'll go back and we'll look at each part of the structure in a lot more detail. So like I say before we get started in this, don't get hung up on this, the detail of this, right? Just get the concept, get the mindset, and as you go and as you hold more and more consultations for yourself, you'll start to find your feet and you'll start to find what works, right? So don't get hung up on any of this stuff if it seems difficult or complicated or something like that. So the first thing that we absolutely positively want to do is set the agenda, right? So this is, well, obviously I'm assuming that we've had a little bit of small talk before we do this. So this would be step two, really. I guess step one would be have a little bit of small talk. So you're just going to, a great way to start the conversation is just say, hey, so where are you calling from today? I'm wherever. I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And then you just want to make some comment about Pennsylvania, right? So I might say something like, Pennsylvania. I've never been there, but I've always wanted to go. I'm a bit of a history buff. I'd like to go to Gettysburg at some point. I find that fascinating. Have you ever been there? And then they'll tell you some stuff, and it's like about 2 minutes is adequate there. And then you just say, okay, well, let's get to business. We're obviously on this call for a reason. So, is it okay, David, if I set an agenda? That way we can we can keep the call on track and we can get the most out of our time together. Is it okay if I set an agenda for this call? Now, the reason you do that is because whoever sets the agenda is in control. That's the dominant personality. That's the alpha on the call, right? So we want to let them know from the very beginning that we're in charge of this call. We're going to direct where it goes. We're in control of the situation, and this is just not going to be a free for all, right? He's not going to get, or she's not going to just be able to get all of their questions answered and then take the information and try and implement it themselves. You have a 2-hour consultation and they won't buy anything, is what will happen. We've got to follow we've got to follow a structure, and we're just telling them at this point that we're actually in charge of this call and we're going to control the direction, right? So what I would do at that point is I would just do as I've said. Is it all right, David, if we set a brief agenda for this call? That way we can stay on track and we can get the most out of this call, and we can stay focused. Is that okay? So you want to ask permission, right? So if they say yes, it's okay, I'm happy to set the agenda, now they're giving you permission to control the direction of the call. Right now, this is permission based sales. Uh, this is not you dominating the conversation, and you want to take control of the situation. People want to be led, they need to be led. And what you're doing here is you're demonstrating that you're going to lead them to where they need to go. If they have to lead you, then how's that going to work, right? If they've got to lead you to the destination, how's that going to work? You're the one that has the information that they're looking for. You've got to lead them, and we do that by setting the agenda. So once they've agreed to an agenda, I walk them through the agenda. Now, these are the stages of the agenda. So I'll say, okay, so we're going to start out by talking about where you are currently in your business. I'll say, David, I really don't know very much about you. I've had a quick look at your website and stuff, but obviously I don't know very much about you. So if we start out by talking about where you are right now and some of the challenges that you're facing within your business, uh, and then after that we can talk about where it is that you want to be. Now, this is where I throw the question in there, the Dan Sullivan question, but we'll come back to that in a minute. So we start out with where you are, then we go to where you'd like to be, then we'll talk a little bit about what's stopping you from getting there. So obviously the reason you're not there right now is because there's some obstacles in the pathway. So we'll talk about what the obstacles are at that point. Then we'll talk about some solutions. If I have some advice I can give you after I fully understand your business, where you are, what it is that you'd like to achieve, and what the problems that you're facing within your business currently are that's stopping that happening. If I have some solutions that I can offer you, then we'll talk a little bit about what we can do to put a plan in place at that point. And then at that point, David, you have the opportunity to ask all of your questions and get all of your questions answered. So we want to let them know that there's a time for them to ask questions, right? So up until this point, we're controlling the conversation, and essentially we're asking the questions and they're answering the questions, right? We're controlling that. We don't want them going all over the place asking questions about landing pages and AdWords campaigns and stuff like that. We want them to be answering questions about their business, their objectives, their goals, and the problems that they face. Up until this point, it's not the time for them to ask questions, but we want them to know that they have a specific time where they're going to get all of their questions answered, right? So we're telling them at that point, you'll get the chance to answer your questions, or you'll get your questions answered. Then I will say, after all your questions have been answered, David, then if it seems like a good fit for us and it seems like a good fit for you, and there might be the possibility of a relationship there, we can discuss how we could move forward with this if it's mutually beneficial for both of us, and we'll decide together if this is something that's right for both of us. How does that sound? So again, you're telling them at this point that they're going to be making a decision on the call, and you're telling them that you're going to be making an offer. You're telling them that you're going to be discussing it together. You're telling them that there's going to be a mutual decision, and you're telling them that that's going to happen. There's going to be a yes or no. So as I say, we want a yes or no on the call, right? So we tell them that at that point we will decide if we're going to move forward, if it's mutually beneficial. So now we've done that, now we've laid that agenda out, and we've got them to agree to it. So we'll say, hey, so David, does that sound okay to you? Does that sound like a reasonable agenda? And I've never had anybody say no. Everybody says, yeah, that sounds fine. So now they've given permission for you to control the conversation. So if they start to move to the left or to the right, if they start to go outside of the agenda that's been set, then we have permission just to pull them back into that agenda. And if they do start to move off, then I would just say, hey, look, Dave, we've got a limited amount of time today, and there's some things that we really need to discuss. So is it all right if we get back to the agenda and pull them back on track? So we're really getting them to give us permission to control the conversation in a very nice way, because like I say, people want to be led. People follow leaders. So at this point, we're demonstrating that we are a leader. We're demonstrating that we're going to lead the conversation. We're demonstrating that we're going to lead them, and we're demonstrating that we're in a position of leadership, as well as getting permission to control the relationship. So this is all very permission based at this point. So hopefully that makes sense. So let's go back and let's go through the various stages here of the call. So we've just set the agenda, and this can actually be scripted. The agenda can be scripted, but it's really the only part that can be scripted. So again, I would say, hey David, is it okay if we set an agenda so we can make sure that I've done a lot of these calls with a lot of people, and I just want to make sure that we get the most amount of value. So you can come up with a script for that. That's fine. The agenda can be scripted, but that's really the only part that can be scripted. The rest needs to be just natural and needs to flow, right? So the next part is we want to find out where they are currently, right? So here's the thing: a prescription without a diagnosis is malpractice, and this is what we want to tell them. If they start deviating uh, from the agenda and saying, "Oh, well, just tell me what it costs or tell me what your solution is," then you got to pull it back, right? You don't want to give them the cost. You don't want to give them the solution until you understand fully the problem, until they fully understand the problem as well. So if they want to jump in and say, "Well, what does it cost? I just want to know what it costs." Well, you got to say, "Well, look, to be honest, at this point, I don't really know. I can't give a diagnosis at this point because the prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. We've got to dig into your business a little bit, and once I understand what problems you're facing, then I can offer you a solution and give you some prices on that." So is it okay if we get back to the agenda here and we talk about where you are currently in your business? So as you can see, the agenda gives you the reins to pull it back in and to keep it on track and to not give out the price and give out that information before you're ready to give it out, right? So what you want to do here is just basically say, hey, so talk to me a little bit. I don't know very much about you. You've had a quick look at your website, so talk to me about where you are currently. And this is where the conversation starts. So they'll give you some biographical information at this point, and this is not really what we're looking for, though. We're looking for the pain points within their business, right? So when we say where you are currently in your business, we mean where are you struggling currently in your business, right? Because we want to dig into where we can help. We don't just want to dig in anywhere. So you want to make that clear. So a good way to deal with that is just say, hey, so obviously there's you've reached out, David. I appreciate you reaching out, but why specifically did you respond to the letter, or why specifically did you contact me or respond to my message on LinkedIn? So what exactly would you like out of this call today? And they're going to tell you what their problems are at that point. And you want to really dig into what the problems are, and really more specifically, if you can, you want to dig into the emotional impact of those problems. So if David says, okay, well, I'd like to increase the dental implant side of my practice, then the question will be, well, why would you like to increase the dental implant side of your practice? And he might say something like, well, because we do a lot of general dentistry, and that's it's hard work, it's constant turnover, it's not very high revenue, but the dental implant side of the business is, there's a lot more money in it, and we can make a lot more money while doing a lot less work, right? And then you might say something like, well, why is that important to you, David? Why would you want to make why would you want to have more time available to you? Is there something specific that you're looking to achieve here? And of course, the result, people are always looking for the same thing, right? They're looking for more time with their family, they're looking for more freedom. And this is what we're looking to uncover. We're actually looking to uncover the biomotivation that's present, right? So the prospect you're talking to is looking for more freedom, they're looking for more security, they're looking for more time with their family, they're looking for these type of things. And these are the things that are going to make somebody make a buying decision. You're not going to get them to buy a product from you based solely on the premise of gain, if that makes sense. They're not going to spend a lot of money with you based solely on the premise that they're going to make more money. What makes somebody make a buying decision, particularly with a high price product, is they're moving away from a pain. They're not necessarily moving towards a pleasure. So if we can uncover those pains by asking good questions, and then we don't want to be manipulative here and say you're in a lot of pain, that's not going to work. We just want to ask lots of questions to really uncover what their true situation is. So if he says, well, yeah, I'd like to spend more time with my family, then you can start to dig into that and say, well, okay, well, how much time currently are you getting to spend with your family? And he might say, well, I'm only spending a couple of hours a day. And you say, well, how is that impacting you? And he might say, well, I've got a couple of young children and I'm missing them grow up, it feels like. And if I could spend an extra 2 or 3 hours a day, or an extra 2 or 3 days a week with them, then I'm going to get to see my children grow up. So you see, we're starting to uncover some really powerful reasons why they might move forward, as opposed to just saying, well, talk to me about your business. And they say, well, we've run newspaper ads and we've run some radio in the past, and it's kind of been all right, but it hasn't really. This stuff is not going to get anybody to make a decision, right? We've got to get to the core emotion that's making the person want to improve their business, and that's generally going to revolve around security, it's going to revolve around family, it's going to revolve around those type of things, right? So hopefully that makes sense. So when we say find out where they are currently, we want to find out more along the lines of the impact that their current situation is having, right? And this is why we said earlier on that both personally and professionally, we've got to attack both aspects. So by addressing the professional life, that impacts the personal life, but the personal life is what's driving the decision. So we've got to get to the bottom of that. So that's all I'm going to say about that, or we're going to run out of time. Really, this video is going to be about 3 hours long. But like I say, you want to dig and find what really is motivating them to move forward, and that's probably going to be a more personal thing. So the next thing is you want to find out where they want to be, right? And this is where you can ask the question. So, okay, so now I understand your business and where you are. So you've got a business that you've got a very profitable product that you're not really getting into the marketplace, and you've got a less profitable product but it's taking a lot of time, so you'd like to move out of that less profitable product into a more profitable one. And that's kind of the overall outcome of that is that your family life is improved, just to summarize. And that's great, but the way I transition into it is I say, okay, so let's just assume hypothetically that we have worked together, and let's say it's 18 months into the future now, what would have to have happened? And then I go back to the question. So again, we want to talk about what their personal life would look like as well as their professional life, because it's a holistic approach we're taking here, and this is what's going to get somebody to make a decision. And we discuss that and we explore that, and our job is just to ask a lot of questions to get the person to really open up and to talk to you about what it is that they really want, right? So what we're trying to do here is we want to create a contrast between where the person is in their current business, their current personal life, and where they want to be. Now, there's obviously going to be a very big gap, right? And the wider this gap is, and the more the person understands this gap, the more likely they are to make a decision to move forward. So if there's a lot of pain in the present and there's potentially a lot of pleasure in the future, then that's obviously a very big gap, right? And there's going to be a lot of motivation to move across that gap because they're a long way from where they want to be. If you can't get them to see for themselves with your questions that they're actually quite a long way from where they want to be, there's a big gap from where they are to where they want to be, and they're going to need some help to get across that gap, then they're not really going to make a decision for you. It's very unlikely. So the next part is finding out what's stopping them, right? So obviously there's a gap between where they are and where they want to be, and they're aware of that gap and they would clearly like to cross that gap, but there's obviously some obstacles in the way that's stopping them from doing that. So this is where I would transition into this section by saying something like, well, that's great, so here's where you are, quick summary, here's where you'd like to be, quick summary. And then I'd say, obviously you're not staying where you have some vision as to where you want to go and you know that's what you want to do, but obviously there's going to be some stuff stopping you doing that, or you would have done it already, right? So what are the obstacles specifically that's standing in your way? And generally they'll tell you, so that they might say something along the lines of, I just don't know how to generate more business in that aspect of my business, or I just don't know how to do this, or I just don't understand that. And what they're doing here is they're telling you what product they're willing to buy from you. They're telling you what product that they need from you in order for them to get from where they are to where they want to be. So when we're talking about the solution later on, we want to be talking in terms of solving the problem that they've just talked about in this section, not talking about AdWords or PPC management or SEO, right? We want to be talking about solutions to these specific problems that they can see now clearly at the obstacles to stopping them, that's stopping them from getting where they are to where they want to be. So this is a very short section. This might only be 5 minutes or so, but we want to run through that and find out what the specific problems are. Now, at this point, we want to offer some solutions. So when I say offer solutions, this is not where we make an offer to them. We just say, okay, so we summarize back what we've just heard to make sure that they understand that we understand, right? And also to make sure that we understand. So I would say, David, so what I understand based on what I'm hearing is A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, and you would like to be here, and these are the problems that are standing in your way. Is that accurate? Is it an accurate summation of your situation? So this is the diagnosis process, right? So you've got to get them to say, yes, that is an accurate diagnosis. At that point, you're now qualified to prescribe a solution. So the solution that you offer has got to be very high level, very general. It's not a detailed solution. We're not going into the nuts and bolts of our solution at this point. So I would say something along the lines of, okay, so based on what you've told me, what you actually need is you need a systematic, organized way to get into the marketplace that's going to allow you to generate all of the dental implant cases that you need, or allow you to generate all of the personal injury cases that you need, and you need to put a system in place that's reliable, it's predictable, it's sustainable. And if you're really looking to manage the level of lifestyle that you have to where you can ramp it up or ramp it down based on where you are at that particular point in time, then we need to put a system in place that allows you to do that. That's going to allow you to turn it up, and it's going to allow you to turn it down if that's what you want to do. How does that sound? So if that's the kind of solution that we're presenting at this time, we're just telling them the outcome of what we're going to do for them, or what we suggest that they would do in their business. Based on our experience, this is what you need in your business, David. And that's where we give them the opportunity to answer questions, or ask questions rather. So this is where we would say, so that's what I would suggest that you need to do based on what you've told me. Does that sound like something that would work in your business? Do you have any questions around that for me? And this is where they're going to start to ask their questions, and this is where they might say, well, how do you do this, how do you do that? And you just this section here goes as long as it needs to go, right? So we've got to answer all of their questions, but we do it at a high level. We try not to go into much detail if we can avoid it. So we wouldn't say like, well, what we're going to do is we're going to go into Google AdWords and we're going to change the keywords and we're going to set the bid to automated bid so we can see what Google actually wants for the inventory, and then we're going to do this and then we're going to do that. We're not going at it from that perspective. That's just you're going to lose the sale if you do that more times than not. We want to answer the questions on the basis of outcome, right? So if somebody says, well, okay, so that sounds great. So how do you do that? Do you use AdWords? And you say, well, yes, AdWords is a tool that we would use to do that, but the outcome of that is you're going to have a reliable, predictable, sustainable flow of qualified leads into your business. That is the major benefit that AdWords brings, is that it's reliable, it's predictable. If we do it properly, it's actually very cost effective, and by doing it this way, you're going to know for sure that you're able to generate as much business as you need to generate at the time that you need to generate it. And if you want to tone it down a little bit because you want to go on vacation, or if you're just very busy, then you're going to have the ability to pull it back as well and tone it down. So we want to make sure that we're answering those questions in terms of the outcome that we're going to provide. We don't want to start talking about the features of an AdWords account, or the features of an SEO campaign, or the features of Facebook or whatever. We just don't want to go there at all. That's going to cost us a sale 100%. Hopefully that makes sense. So once they've asked all their questions, and you really want to make sure you want to ask them over and over again, are you sure you don't have any more questions? Because they're not going to buy if they've got questions, right? So we want to make sure that all of their questions are answered. Then we go to the offer. When we're satisfied that all of their potential objections have been met, then we go to the offer. And this is just going to be a very low key, very matter of fact, no big deal type thing, right? So we want to offer a glove in hand solution to their problem. So remember back when they told us that the difficulties that they're having, we want to kind of tailor it to that, and we want to make it a glove in hand, very low key, very easy solution. So say, okay, so based on everything you've told me here today, Dave, what we've got to offer you would be just perfect for you. We've got some solutions that are just perfect for everything you've said. Is that something that you'd like to know about? Would you like to hear more about that? And of course, they're going to say yes. So we want to get their permission, because now we're in the actual sales part of the process. So we want their permission to sell to them. So this is permission-based sales. We've got permission to sell to them, and this is where we make the offer. So we say, based on everything that you've told me, that we have a solution that will be absolutely perfect for you. We can put a system in place that will allow you to generate all of the leads that you need to generate on an ongoing basis in a very cost-effective manner. We can turn it up when it needs to be turned up. We can turn it down when it needs to be turned down. Is that something you'd be interested in doing? Right? So we're not saying we're going to offer you AdWords management. We're telling them here's the solution we have a solution to your problem, and here's exactly what it looks like. It's a system that allows you to generate business as you want, and you can turn it up and you can turn it down, and it's very cost effective. It's a turnkey solution, David. We can implement it for you. We just need a couple of pieces of information from you up front. Once we've got that, then it really is a turnkey solution. It's not going to bring about any more work on your end. It's not going to create any stress on your staff. We can completely manage this on your behalf, and it's really going to be a great solution with very little maintenance on your end. Is this something that you'd be interested in? Would you like to do that, do you think? And then this is where the price is going to come up more often than not. So you want to relate the price back to the outcome that they want. You don't just want to throw a price out there, right? You don't say, well, it's $5,000 a month, because that's a ridiculous number. It doesn't mean anything. It's not related to anything. So when the person says, okay, yeah, I mean, it sounds great. Of course, I'm very interested, but it's going to come down to price. What are we talking about? You want to get a number out of them and say, okay, so let me ask you a question before I give you a price. What increased revenue would you like in your business on a monthly basis? What would be a great result for you? And if he says, well, ideally, I'd like a $50,000 increase in revenue, that would be an ideal scenario for me, then I would say something along the lines of, okay, well, that's very realistic, but here's the thing, we're looking at about roughly a 10 to 1 return on what we do. Sometimes it's a little bit more, sometimes it's a little bit less. So does $10 in return for every $1 you spend, does that sound like a reasonable investment to you? And of course they're going to say yeah, because that's a heck of a good return, right? 10 to 1, every $1 you spend you get 10 back. So then based on that, and based on the fact that he's given you a $50,000 increase in his business, now you've got a number to work off of, right, which is $5,000. So you say, based on the fact, David, that you're looking for a $50,000 return, you're looking for a $50,000 increase in your business on a monthly basis, and based on the fact that we can typically get a 10 to 1 return on your investment, then we will be looking at a complete monthly investment, a total monthly investment of somewhere in the region of $5,000. Does that sound like something that you'd be interested in? So now you've related the cost to an outcome, and he can see that it makes sense. That number has it's been derived from something legitimate. It's been derived from an outcome. And if he just says, well, look, to be honest, could we start a little bit smaller than that and say, well, okay, what would you be comfortable with? Would you be comfortable with a $30,000 return? If he says, well, okay, that's fine. Well, then we'd be looking at a total monthly investment of approximately $3,000. Is that something that's more suitable for you, do you think? Is that something that you would like to start out with? And then obviously your management fee and the ad spend is going to come out of that 3,000, so I would split that typically 50-50. The bigger the ad spend, the smaller the percentage of the fee, obviously. But if it was $10,000 ad spend, I'd probably take a $3,000 fee, something like that. So that's something you got to decide. We can talk about that at a later date. But you want to relate the price to the outcome. If you don't, if you just come out and say, yeah, we can do this for you, it's $5,000 a month or $3,000 a month, then there's nothing. That's just an outrageous number, and it's where has that number come from? The person down the road is willing to do this for $300, and you're telling me $3,000? It's really important that you relate your fee to a much bigger outcome, and then of course your fee looks a lot smaller as well. So at this point, this is where he's probably going to say, sounds good, but how are those fees broken down? Can you talk to me a little bit about how that works? Or can you explain to me your fee structure a little bit more? This is where I would go for the decision, right? So I'd say, okay, or I'd ask the question, is this something that you're interested in? Would you like to know more specifically about the fee structure? And if they say yes, then this is where I would bring about something to force the decision at that point, something to get a yes or no. Because if you don't, they're going to say, I'll think about it. Sounds good. I'm not saying I'm not interested. It sounds good. I need to think about it. That's what they're going to say, right? 100% of the time, or at least 95% of the time. So at this point, I say, okay, so here's how it works. So it's a $5,000 total monthly investment. That is going to be divided between the actual cost of the ads themselves and the management fee. So what we do is we have you place your credit card on file with Google, and they charge you directly for the cost of the ads, and then we send you an invoice for the actual management portion of it separately. So you've got two separate expenses there. One goes directly to Google, so we're not getting any of that whatsoever. That's 100% going to Google when you pay that on your credit card. Which the reason we do that is it just works out better for tax reasons and for accounting reasons and stuff like that. The other aspect is our management fee, and we would invoice you that on a monthly basis. So there is one other fee, which is that there's a one-time setup fee, which you can choose whatever that is. Depending on, I usually make it similar to the management fee. So I would say there's a one-time setup fee, and that's $3,000. But if you were interested in this, if this is something that you'd like to move forward with, and you was willing to make a decision today, then I would be willing to waive that $3,000 setup fee. If you were willing to move forward today and you were willing to process the invoice today, is that something that you would like to move forward with? Is this something that you'd like to do? So as you can see, we're not forcing them to make a decision. There is a setup fee, right? That's all there is to it. But if they make a decision, they get to save a little bit of money. So they're welcome to come back tomorrow. If somebody says, well, look, I just can't make a decision today. I'm just not prepared to make a decision today. I'll think about it and I'll come back tomorrow or the next day. Then you say, well, that's fine. You're more than welcome to do that. But if you want to come back tomorrow and make the decision tomorrow, there will be a $3,000 setup fee at that point. That's just the way it is. Or however you want to word it, you can find some nice way to say it. So basically what you're doing here is you're making them make a decision. If they want this product from you, if they want your help, then they will want to save the $3,000 fee. They will want to. And no matter what anybody says, they can move forward today. They can make a decision today. They may not be able to pay your invoice today. That might be legitimate, right? But they can make a decision today. They can say yes. So if somebody says, well, the setup fee is fine, I don't really care, I need to think about this, so I'm more than happy to pay that setup fee, so I'll come back to you tomorrow or the next day, then guess what? They're telling you they're not interested. If they're interested in moving forward, then they're going to want to save that setup fee. And if they're not interested, then they're going to tell you that they're going to think about it and they're happy to pay the setup fee, and you know not to waste any more time with that person, right? So basically all we're doing here is if they come back tomorrow, if people get funny about it and say, well, you're pressuring me, you're forcing me to make a decision. You say, well, I'm not forcing you to do anything. All I'm doing is, if you come back tomorrow, then you're going to get this for a great price. It's going to be a great deal and you're going to get it for a great price. All I'm doing is I'm giving you an opportunity to get this for a better price today. If you wanted to make a decision today, I'm giving you the opportunity to get it for a better price today. And that's it, really. At that point, they're gonna tell you that they're interested or they're not interested. They're gonna say, "Yeah, I'd like to move forward," or "No, I don't want to move forward," or "I'll think about it," right? And I think about it means I'm not going to move forward. So if they say, "Yeah, I think I want to do this. I'm interested. What do we do now?" Then we lock the deal down. We're going to talk about that in another video. This video is getting a little bit lengthy, so we're going to put that in another video. So at that point, you want to actually lock the deal down properly. If they ask for a proposal, then generally we don't send a proposal, and we're going to deal with that in another video. And finally, if they say yes, they want to go ahead, they're happy to go ahead, then at that point we reassure them that they've made a great decision. We stay on the phone and we talk to them for a while, and we just reassure them that they've made a great decision, right? So that's pretty much the whole process. There's quite a lot of information there. Listen to the recording a few times here and work through it. But like I say, it's really about being the person's trusted advisor. I'm sure everybody's heard of that term, trusted advisor, and it's thrown around quite loosely, but this is really about establishing that trust. And throughout this whole call, we're trying to genuinely help the person. We're trying to genuinely get them to the next level. We're trying to genuinely understand their problems and offer them solutions to their problems. So that's the main thing. There's been a lot of information in this particular video, but don't get hung up on it. As I've said, and I'm going to keep saying it, don't get hung up on it. Don't think just because there's so much information in here that you have to do all of this stuff. This would be an ideal scenario. But if as long as you're approaching this call from a trust-based position, from a place of trust, that you genuinely want to help this person and you're really not attached to the outcome, and this is where that close comes in, when you say, if you make a decision today, I can waive that $3,000 setup fee for you. If you don't, it's going to be applicable tomorrow. You've got to not care if they say no at that point. If you start to think, this person's really, really interested, and if I force the decision, then I'm going to lose the sale. No, 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 no. If you don't force the decision, you're going to lose the sale, right? If you don't force it, you're going to lose the sale. That's all there is to it. If somebody gets off this call and says, I'll think about it, then that's a soft no. Or it might even be worse than that. It's a bit further along than a soft no. They're not really very interested, right? So by getting them, by using the limitation at the end, and by saying, if you make a decision now, you get a discount, then you're putting in that person into a position where they have to decide whether they want to move forward or whether they don't want to move forward. And if they can't move forward at that point, it's because you haven't provided enough information to get them to say yes, or they're not particularly interested, and they're certainly not going to make a decision in favor of once you get off the phone with them. I mean, one in 10 might come back and say, yes, I'd do it, but you've probably blown 4 sales to get that one. So if you're not hearing no's, you're not hearing yeses. So you will get a lot more no's doing this. Make no mistake about that. A lot of people will say no that you will think might have said yes if you give them the opportunity to think about it, but trust me, they don't. I've done like literally hundreds and hundreds of these calls now, and they don't come back and say yes. Very, very occasionally. Very occasionally. And like I say, it's not a hard and fast rule. We don't have to do it. And sometimes people will give a legitimate reason not to do it. But as soon as you get attached to the outcome, and by allowing them off the call without making a decision, the only reason you're doing that is because you think you're going to get a yes. If you do that, you've become attached to getting a yes. So you've departed from what works. You've departed from helping them to make a decision. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more as well in upcoming videos. You're not doing them a service at all by allowing them to stay undecided. All you've done there is you've just become attached to the outcome, and as soon as you become attached to the outcome, the decision becomes a no from the client, pretty much. So that's the core structure. The next video we're going to look a little bit more at getting the decision on the end of the call and why this is important. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that and how we're actually serving the client by putting them in a position where they do need to say yes or no. We're going to talk about that and why getting the decision is very, very important. So this video's got a little bit long, so I'm going to end it here, and we'll head over to the next video, and I'll see you there.